We want to help teach you how to make great YouTube videos.
We have the Canon R5 GH4, iPhone 16 Pro Max, DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and last up, the GoPro 13 Black.
Hey, what's up everybody? Casey Cooper here with Adam Tuminaro, Mr. Orlando Drummer on YouTube. For many, many years, we've created bad content, we've created good content. We have learned a lot along the way. And today we're gonna talk about choosing the best microphone and camera to create your best content. Let's go.
All right, guys, let's hop into cameras and have a quick discussion about the two main categories of cameras. Now, yes, we could come up with a lot more categories, but as far as YouTube content creation, there's mainly two categories of cameras that you want to think about, especially if you're just now shopping for a camera. So we have DSLR, or more commonly, mirrorless cameras. These are your big-bodied cameras that have interchangeable lenses on them. That's what we mean when we say a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. So they are bigger, they are heavier, and some of the main manufacturers that you're gonna see would be Canon, Sony, Panasonic, all names that you've heard of before. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have our smaller action cams. You know, honestly, nowadays, you could really include most modern phones. If you are creating YouTube content that doesn't require you to travel, to move around, to go to different locations, well, you can certainly handle the weight and the bulk of a bigger camera. Lenses and cameras of that size typically will give you better image quality. The catch is, it is heavy. So if you are creating content that requires you to move around, travel, pack up your camera gear inside of a bag and go somewhere, maybe flying with it, you know, you really do want to consider, will you bring a 5-pound or a 10-pound camera rig with you? That led me into more of the action cam and phone sort of stuff. So common brands that you'll see in the action cam world would be DJI, GoPro, and then all of your main cell phone manufacturers. So iPhone and Samsung all have incredible cameras throughout a variety of different models that can work for content creation. Now, a key thing to think about when you're trying to decide, do you want a mirrorless camera with a larger body or a more portable action camera, is whether or not you actually want to learn the skill of videography. For some people, they're really not interested in, you know, attaining a totally new skill set that is videography or photography. Maybe you're not that interested in how cameras work. If that's the case, I would go with a much simpler action camera or a high-quality phone camera. It's going to be a lot simpler to dive in and start creating content quickly, and there's not going to be much of a learning curve with those cameras, as we'll talk about later in this video. Some of the new models coming out from DJI and GoPro, they are so intuitive and easy to use, there's really no learning curve at all. But if you are passionate about becoming a better videographer and it's something that you want to invest in and improve with over time, you're going to have a much, much easier time learning on a larger mirrorless camera from one of the main manufacturers here, Canon, Sony, or Panasonic. All right, so let's start off with cameras. We're actually going to go from sort of most common or smallest up to biggest, maybe the least common. So right now we have an iPhone 16 Pro Max. That is Casey's phone. And I'll show you some footage off of that. You might already have an iPhone, it's likely, but if you wanted another angle, it'd be good to add an action camera like this one. This is the GoPro 13 Black. Check it out. Next up, we have one of my favorite action cameras on the market. This is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. It is a popular camera and for good reason. Check it out. All right, up next we have an awesome little camera from Panasonic. This is the GH4. This is not a full frame camera. So when we put a 14mm lens on it, it's not actually gonna give us 14mm. It's gonna be slightly zoomed in, right, or cropped in. And you just wanna keep that in mind when you're shopping for cameras and lenses, because if you're limited on space, you know, you're gonna have to have a wide enough shot to get everything in frame. That's an advantage of the action cameras. They are very, very wide. So you'll see what 14mm looks like running through a cropped sensor here on the GH4. Check it out. And then last up, this is a beast of a mirrorless camera. Me and Casey both love the R series from Canon, just incredible stuff. So this is the R5. The lens that we have on here is 15 millimeters. So it is roughly the same focal length as the last lens, but this is now a full frame sensor. So you're gonna notice it's a little bit wider, even though the settings on our lenses are identical, just to show you that difference in a full frame. All right, now let's talk a little bit about microphones. Now, for specifically musicians, this conversation could go in a million different directions, but to make sure that this is universally useful to everybody watching, we're just gonna talk about recording vocals. So these are the types of microphones that you would buy if you just were concerned with talking on camera. So I have this broken down into two basic categories: wireless microphones and wired microphones. So with or without cables is basically how I'm separating these here. There is one other type of microphone that you might see, and that would be what I call a camera-mounted microphone. There's a few different reasons that you would use that, so I have that sort of as a weird third category down here. So for wireless microphones, these are going to be very similar to like your action cameras. The reason you would go with a wireless microphone is typically for travel. That's a really good reason to have it. There's no argument that wireless technology, when used in microphones, is going to give you the highest quality sound, but it can still be very, very good. You're listening to me now on a wireless microphone, and I use these sometimes even in the studio just because it's quick and easy. If I'm traveling, I'm absolutely using a wireless lav mic just like this one. The brands you'll want to look into would be DJI, RØDE, and Tascam. There are many, many other companies that make wireless microphones that sound and function incredibly well, but these three brands are really popular, and I've owned gear from all three of them. It's really good stuff there. Now, for wired microphones, I would think about this in terms of highest quality, but also if you are recording where you're going to be stationary. So if you're recording at a desk, like a podcast setup, really good idea to have a wired microphone, because now you've opened up a lot more sonic quality. There are a lot of options on the market in terms of high quality vocal microphones, and as well as like mounting situations. You can clamp things to desks or put them on stands. So it really just depends on your use case. But for me, I use both in my studio all the time. It just depends on what actual piece of content I'm working on. So if you get a wired microphone, there are two types that you're going to look for here. USB microphones, that literally means there will be a USB-C cable, most likely, coming out of the microphone. It's built in, and that cable will plug into your laptop or into your computer. So you can just directly go from microphone to computer. But if you get a microphone that's a little bit more traditional, or it's built in the standard way, it's going to have an XLR cable, which is a 3-pin microphone connector. Now, XLR cables do not plug into computers. We need a piece of gear in between your microphone and your computer to interpret or translate that signal, and that piece of gear is called an audio interface. There are a million audio interfaces on the market. One that I would recommend, gladly is the Universal Audio Volt series. They come in 2 channels, 4 channels, and I believe there's many other models as well. Focusrite is another company whose gear I've used for years. So these audio interfaces allow you to plug your microphones in, and then that sound is translated within the interface, and it's sent into your computer that way. Yes, it's an extra step, but it's one of those markers of quality. If high quality vocal recordings are your priority, I would not recommend going with wireless microphones or even USB microphones. In that case, you would want to use an XLR microphone going into a high quality interface. But again, it's all use case based, right? Now in our wired category here, let me just give you a couple examples of some microphones that you could look into. Earthworks makes an awesome mic called the Icon. They make it in an XLR version and in a USB version. That's a really good mic that I've used for podcasting before. You could also look into the Sennheiser Profile USB. Really, really good wired microphone that's very, very simple with some controls on the microphone to get your sounds dialed in. I've also owned microphones like the AKG C414, which is an incredibly nice and fairly expensive microphone, but that has to be run into an interface. So again, this is all use case dependent. And this third category down here is just an option it's very dependent on what you're doing. But RØDE is a good example of a company who makes a lot of microphones that get mounted directly on top of the camera and then point at whatever it is that you're shooting. It's not always ideal to have that for vocals unless you are physically very, very close to the camera, which may or may not be a thing that you do in your content. All right, now we are going to show you guys a few different different camera options. But before we do that, because we were just talking about microphones, we're recording this talking segment right now with 3 separate types of microphones. So the one you're hearing now is the DJI wireless microphone that is clipped here on my collar. The one that you were hearing now is this microphone that is running through an interface. So this is the Earthworks Ethos, fantastic microphone for the price, and that's running into the Universal Audio Volt 476p interface over there. And then the mic that you were hearing now is actually mounted about 5 feet in front of me on the camera that you're seeing. So that is the RØDE Go. It's mounted directly on top of the camera, but you can tell as I get a little bit closer, it starts to sound much, much better. But if you're sitting at a distance of about 5 feet away, that might not be the microphone that you want to use for your vocal recordings.
All right, everybody, that is the end. Hopefully you can take this information and you can go make great content, and certainly understanding that it's not one size fits all.
Absolutely, man. I hope you guys just treat this as some general guidelines to save you some time, hopefully save you some money as you're shopping for your next microphone, your next camera, or working on your next piece of content. Yeah, let these two old YouTubers, you know, just save you a couple bucks and maybe a couple years of wasted time. So yeah, it's awesome, man. Thanks for having me out, brother.
Boom.